Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Particle Accelerator Podcast, where we talk to future thinking business leaders about how to grow their team and accelerate their business. I'm here today with Karl. Karl, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name's Karl Andersen, founder, CEO of Lektra. I've been running previously a private equity fund for several years, focused on distributed energy. Prior to that, ran a reinsurance company. Prior to that, a hedge fund. And prior to that, a broker dealer. So my whole experience has been financial, Wall Street. But no, we're a private equity fund. We start focusing on distributed energy and tech companies related to that. Elektra is a tech company. It's kind of an outgrowth from my learnings as a private equity manager.
Awesome. So I'm super excited to talk to you about the renewable energy space, but I would love to know as a human being how you made your first dollar.
My first dollar was when I was about 10 years old. Actually, younger than that, scratch it. I was mowing my parents' lawn and they gave me $5 when I was about 7 years old. I got really excited by that. The handlebar went over my head, so I had to use the middle handle and I pushed it. I don't think I made exactly straight lines on my first shot at it, but my parents encouraged me. So I got $5 out of that. And then my first career move was as a paper boy at 10 years old, started delivering newspapers. I had about 38 customers. This was in Massachusetts, so it was a nice suburb outside of Boston. And then my brother started getting too old for his, so I took his paper route over. So I had about 100 customers. I had developed envelopes for each one of them, delivered those on Thursday nights to collect. Learned how to pay bills, win raffles. I got Patriots tickets all the time, and I knew how to start building an enterprise when I was a kid. I really wish for every kid they could have a paper route.
My audience has heard me say a million times how my first dollar was from a paper route. I did a fair amount of landscaping, and I think running a paper route, since you have to go do that collections, it's just a great connection with what it means to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to get up every morning, offer you something of value that has a wholesale cost at a retail rate. Like we knew how much our papers cost because we had to go pay the newspaper for them. Then we had to ask for that money and keep track who paid us and who didn't. I think it's a great foray into entrepreneurship.
Oh, absolutely. My older brother taught me also how not to do the paper route because he wasn't the best paper boy. And this customer never pays. When he was showing me it for the first time, he dunked the newspaper, ripped the front page, chucked it at their front door. And I was wondering, he's like, why am I not getting tips? I'm like, there's a way to deal with people and a way not to deal with people.
Yeah, for sure. At 6 o'clock in the morning in my neighborhood, you could hear my skateboard wheels going over the cracks in the sidewalk. I'm not sure that garnished me that many tips, but it sure was a fun way to deliver the paper. Try to hit the front screen door of each house.
So you actually wrapped them up and threw them.
Yeah, we banded on. The first step was to sit at my kitchen table and put rubber bands around each one. Tell me, was there a toy or hobby that you think influenced what you do career-wise today? Or was there something that you think as a child like really influenced you?
I think that skateboarding helped. Speaking of skateboarding, it's one of those sports that you have to keep trying and trying to get better at. And again, around 7, 8 years old was the first time I dropped in on a half pipe. There was a kid in our neighborhood. He was 13 years old and his parents had left. So we went over his house and they're blasting AC/DC or some whatever music they were playing. And my first drop in, my face went straight to the flat part of the big fat lip. But as a kid, I was just like, oh, I'm going to do that again. After they put some ice on me, within the next 30 minutes, I was doing it again. And it taught me, like, if you really want to get good at something, you just keep going and going and keep trying and trying. I think that's important. And then I think music, I was a percussionist and actually I was going to go into the conservatory at a school. And music, I think, heavily influences a lot of kids. I loved it. I played percussion. I had bands, battle of the bands and everything. But I was in the jazz band, wind ensemble, and our school competed nationally in wind ensemble. It just became really a part of me and my friends and groups. The cute girls, especially battle of the bands, it attracted those types. So I think every man is trying to look for their future wife, even starting at the age of 13. You just think it's cool and hopefully you win some ladies over in the process.
That's right. What was your favorite and least favorite course in school?
Probably my least favorite was English. I love English now. I love literature because I get it and I understand it. But I think when I was in high school reading Don Quixote, I just checked out a little bit. My favorite class was definitely physics by far. I gravitated towards it. It made sense. Description of the physical world, pulleys and force equals mass times acceleration. As soon as I understood these things, it was just like, oh, that's how you explain the world. So I was always interested by sciences. They didn't teach meteorology, which was actually my first love as a science. I loved the Weather Channel. I loved reading weather maps. I actually started flying airplanes when I was 13 and a half. to the ground school, but you can't go solo till you're 16 and a half. It was just hard to take more lessons at 16 and a half, but I loved meteorology and physics. It's definitely by far my two favorite.
Cool.
Yeah.
What do you think the best innovation has been in the last 300 years?
300 years? I think the light bulb is pretty kick-ass. Electricity and the utilization of electricity is a huge leap forward for everything. And then combustion engines or any type of engine is throughout.
Yeah, the world's gotten so small to be able to go pop on a plane and be in Dubai in 8 hours. It just makes the whole world available to us.
So airplanes, aeronautics. What do you think yours is?
For me, it's definitely the combustion engine is big, but just air travel, as safe as it is, just to be able to go. A year ago, I went all the way around. I went west. I went to San Diego, had a meeting with some folks, flew through Japan. I didn't really stop in Japan because they were crazy about COVID for a long time. Then Singapore for a weekend, hung out with a buddy. Then went 2 different spots in India, went into the Himalayan foothills with my business partner in India, and then caught a UFC match in Abu Dhabi, and then flew out through Dubai. Like 3-week trip, but I saw a considerable amount of the world, and it wasn't that expensive. It's affordable. So I think that
is the crazy part. Like you think about it when you'd read about countries when you're a kid, like India or something. That was like a lifelong trip you would take once for most of humankind, if ever. Now you can just go online and be like, oh, we're going to go to Mumbai whenever you want. If you have the means.
Whenever you want.
A
Couple $1,000s, not that out of reach.
Yeah, I like that.
Cool. I want to get into what you're working on. You've built Lektra around converting distributed renewable energy into compute power. So I think when we were talking before, I'm a home labber. And so home labbers often find used gear, but that used gear is from a different generation, right? It's usually 10 years old or more, but you can get these phenomenal blade rack mounted servers, things that make you beat your chest as a home labber. But what I found is people look at their energy bill and they're like, okay, cool. I found this old hardware. Theoretically, I could run the same thing on a mini PC that takes 10 watts of power, but I'm running it on this 40-watt power server. So I'm just super curious about this. How do you handle the intermediacy challenges of solar wind when compute workloads require consistent uptime? And then what's your approach to resource scheduling and redundancy?
I don't know how much your audience knows about what we're doing, the problem we're trying to solve, why we arrived at it. I want to answer them in the context of what problem we're trying to solve. So basically, as running the private equity fund, it was focused on distributed energy in Norway and the Nordics. In Norway, it's an oil country, and domestically, 98% of the electricity runs off hydroelectricity. It's a very weird country that way. They export hydrocarbons and then consume basically electricity, but they went through their energy transfer super fast, or energy transition. 70% of the cars on the road right now are EVs. 93% of cars sold last year were EVs. They have port-side charging for the boats. So it's a full economy that's been electrified. The issue with that is they have to quadruple the size of their grid in the next 10 years. We started looking at grids globally and realized that they're actually just crap everywhere we went. In the United States, there's several problems of facing. They were developed in the 1960s, held together by these telephone poles, loose wires. Just visually, they're underwhelming. With the private equity fund, we actually had technology related to fixing servers and transformers. Some of the companies would just buy the IP and bury it. So there's been no upgrades to the technology either. So as a result, 2021, ERCOT, huge ice storm, system goes down, almost complete failure. Most grid lines run at 60 hertz, at least in the United States, 60 hertz. If that fails for 9 minutes, it's lights out for a while, and all the grid switches will go off, and they have to then reboot the grid system. They were 4 minutes away from total lights out. 250 people died during that disaster, but had that tripped, hospitals, you've got 30% of your population dead within 30 days. It would have blown a ton of transformers. We do not have a transformer reserve here in the United States. So those were huge red flags as I started researching. Then I got to go to this movie premiere down in Washington, D.C. It was with Dennis Quaid. It's called Grid Down, Power Up. This is a really good film if you want to scare the crap out of yourself before you go to bed at night. Dennis Quaid also a little shorter than I thought he'd be, but you know, what celebrity isn't? I got to meet General Wesley Clark, and part of his whole spiel was that 42,000 known terrorists had come across the border in the last 3 years. It takes 9 substations to take out the entire grid. And the U.S. military runs 90% off the public grid. I was just like, you gotta be kidding. For all the yelling and screaming we do about all these politics and woke stuff, I thought in the back of my mind, there were still adults in D.C. who were working on this problem. The Department of Energy, somebody, I don't know what we got out of the grid, maybe some upgrades. it is not solving a fundamental problem. One of my colleagues who joined us, he was at Con Edison, and he was telling us in confidence, but now I think this is more public news, that they were going to face rolling blackouts and brownouts here in Manhattan in 2029 and 2030. This is all before hyperscale data centers enter the scene with AI. This is such a disaster. So yeah, the plan is that we're going to build another 1,000 data centers over the next 5-10 years, which would mean we'd have to expand the grid by 22%. As I mentioned, there's no supply chain for this. So there's no way we can actually build that. Never mind Elon Musk saying we're going to have all these 1 million robots plus and all our jobs are going to be run by AI. You would have to make the grid 2 to 3 times the size of what it is today. So it's these ambitions of other entrepreneurs. Now, obviously, I admire Elon Musk. I'm not saying anything, but I'm just saying from the power requirements to facilitate this, physically, the infrastructure is just not there at all. So then people are like, small modular nuclear. It's fine. I'll take a step back and I'll then address like different energy resources. We start saying, okay, so how do we get people to build grid 2.0? We need to expand this grid size to meet the power requirements. The interesting part is because there's so much cloud demand, so much AI demand, we started realizing that there's all these stranded energy assets, all these solar owners, natural gas producers, and there's no platform that actually has sat between energy producers and cloud compute. And so, the spread between energy, so you can produce solar, it's 3 cents a kilowatt hour. If you're selling back to the grid, you're only getting 6 cents a kilowatt hour. You're buying at 20, selling at 6. It's a disaster. If you power a micro data center at your location and you sell that off through our cloud or any other cloud, you're getting anywhere from $1, $2 an hour up to $32 an hour. Game changer for people who are merchant providers of energy. That's what Lektra is all about, connecting merchant owners of energy, solar owners in particular. If you're a homeowner and you had solar on your roof, basically all you're doing is buying more or less a gaming computer, a little souped up with sort of a 5090 card like NVIDIA. You're putting it in your house, connecting it to Wi-Fi, and now instead of that energy that would have gone back to the grid, you're using the energy to power your micro data center. Through Wi-Fi or high-speed internet, you're connecting to Lektra Cloud or our affiliates, and you're getting paid from cloud distributors. So now you're part of the cloud. You're making 80% cloud revenue. Lektra keeps 20. That's our business model, but whatever. The point is now there's an opportunity, almost like an Airbnb, to utilize your energy in a merchant economy. That's stage 1 of Lektra. The idea then is to write LLMs, the energy LLMs that can forecast where energy needs to be on a distributed basis. Homes, community batteries, island grids, microgrids that can fill in the gaps. In terms of latency, to answer your question, solar is an intermittent power. With battery storage, and depending on how you size it, you can get 24/7 power. So for the most part. Now, to be SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, we still back up to the grid or a second power source. So in some cases, even propane or natural gas. So like it's solar first, battery second, propane or grid third. So you're always up and running. And then for latency issues, really our focus has been less on, so when you think about it, Amazon has 130 global locations. With Lektra, we are truly an edge network because we're tapping into all the solar homeowners, the businesses that have solar, and we co-locate all those servers everywhere. So we have an edge compute capacity. Similarly to like the traders on Wall Street who have servers next to the exchanges to get low latency, we also are performing the same thing. If you wanted to have a Waymo, let's say you own Waymo, you may want to have a bunch of servers at that location, and Lektra can do that, because then they can run jobs locally as opposed to going back to a hyperscale data center.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the first point of awareness here that you're bringing up is that our grid is a lot more fragile than we believe it to be. For the last 10 years, we just keep plugging in devices, some expansion of the grid to support that, but the rate in which we continue to plug in devices and consume power for compute just keeps increasing. And the supply chain has not been built around that. We build data centers, but we don't necessarily build power stations.
The energy loads that are on the grid now due to hyperscale data centers is causing so much friction. Like it's caused when the Virginia's data center alley and the Carolinas, you're seeing electricity prices within a year jump by 100%. So it's already happening. And the demand for energy is only, with AI, it's just going parabolic. It's going crazy. In fact, other clouds have actually reached out to us already on our infrastructure and said, how can we work together? because they recognize you're going to need alternative power sources. And, small modular nuclear, we embrace it because like our patents cover all distributed energy as it relates to powering GPUs and TPUs and DPUs and 16 other processing cars. So I would embrace nuclear. I'm not dismissing anything. The issue with small modular nuclear is it may take about 5 more years to get it commissioned. Even with Trump or whatever the administration tried to do, they're cutting as much red tape as fast as possible. But I've been talking to nuclear experts, and you can tell because uranium isn't being bought at the rate it should be to have this big expansion growth in small modular nuclear. So that's a little telling that and we're partners with Radiant and a few others, small modular nuclear, but that's a 2030, 2032 kind of conversation. The other issue is that the next generation of kids, basically since the 70s, because we started shutting down nuclear reactors or stopped training the next generation, we don't have a labor force. The only labor force that knows how to correct nuclear is Army Corps of Engineers. My kids now want to be like DJs and influencers and whatever. But we got to train the next generation in apprenticeships in nuclear, because what if your small modular nuclear device breaks down in North Dakota? Is Jim the handy fix-it nuclear guy going to show up like the Jetsons and just fix your nuclear reactor? No, there's no suppliers of that labor force. So that's one of the issues I see.
Yeah, it's great because you mentioned a lot about energy independence and security. And is this primarily an economic play, or I think you're insinuating it's really a national security play or a future capability? How does that frame your decisions?
It's a little bit of all of it. What drives me mostly is the national security issue. It is the Achilles heel, could take us out in 2 minutes. I know the US probably has a bunch of capabilities. We could mess with other people's grid too, but why give people that vulnerability? Why not just build a better, more resilient distributed grid and go at it that way? At the same time, though, energy as an asset class hasn't really existed. We've all been price takers since the invention of the grid. There's an oil and gas market that's been traded, futures contracts, you can trade that. But in terms of merchant producers of energy, that hasn't existed in like 100 years. Now you can actually do that with solar panels or installations of batteries, or maybe you have natural gas on site, on-prem. There's a different way to monetize this. I don't think it's limited to cloud compute. I think we can use energy for a lot of other things. So it's this whole asset class that has been undervalued. We ran a model where if we had 1 million people adopt like Lektra device or Lektra micro data center, and it would turn out with like $1 per hour, we add something like $2 trillion to GDP, because the property rights of energy have not been in the hands of owners. We're trying to build like a shared economy at the same time. So why not solve the problem by allowing people to make money? That only incentivizes the growth of the infrastructure faster in the way we were thinking. So that's why our starting point hasn't been to just find government money to build infrastructure in hopes that it does something later. It's more, let's get everyone understanding that we can make money out of this. That demand will drive better infrastructure.
Yeah, that's really cool. I've noticed a common theme in a lot of science fiction novels, which tend to move less fiction and more to articulated futurism.
Yeah.
Neil Stephenson is really good about this. In the Baroque cycles, he articulates that the affluent class calls themselves Victorians. And while they leverage technology, they're very discreet about it. They want to have handmade goods. And so you're bringing in an added dimension. Like maybe the cost of energy is so high that their reluctance to use energy is what maintains their affluence, right? They're saving a ton of money. The common class are getting cybernetic implants out of a quest for survival. They're just using technology to try to get a leg up, including robbing themselves of their own humanism by the implants and the neural links. As a technologist emerging into the market after the dot-com bubble, in my lifetime, technology has generally been good. The rapid sharing of information, and we're just now entering a time where it's just because you can doesn't mean you should. And then I think as AI comes on more, this moral gut check is going to happen more before we use whatever's available in tech. One of the things I'm talking to with a bunch of my buddies in faith-based circles is how do we keep our young boys from falling in love with an AI girlfriend or this kind of stuff, like the real concerns about when you should use social media, like how much time should you be watching reels? And so we're entering in a really interesting time where just because the technology exists doesn't necessarily mean you should use it. And you're just bringing an added dimension to that as energy costs continue to rise. Like maybe having a TV in every room of your household is not the best idea.
100%. Well, but I do believe market forces they're just governing dynamics of markets, and it's hard to control them. I think what I want to do is basically give people, though, a fighting chance in this dystopia. The promise of AI right now is basically you're going to lose your job first, and then you're all going to die. I don't know who's doing the PR for AI, but put the brakes on it or fire them, because I actually think when you put Lektra at someone's house or farm or whatever, it doesn't have to be Lektra. I'm just saying they can own their own AI bot or AI PC, which is basically what Lektra is. It's an AI PC. And then that can really run your farm. Caterpillar makes basically like drone tractors. You can start running and then utilizing energy for more purposes that are fundamental to your lifestyle. And that data is a very rich data that you should be able to control, and then use open source LLMs to monetize and sell back to OpenAI and all these guys. The fact that they're scraping all this intellectual property and all these rights, trademarks, etc., that's what I'm at odds against. And in the name of trying to defeat our friends over who make good spring rolls and crab rangoon and whatever, and I have no problem with it. The government's a little crazy, but the whole point about America and the West is that we defended property rights. That's what has made us strong. And so I think AI, we really need to figure out a way to preserve that. When you own your own AI PC, when you own your own data, because we've been taught since social media, this is one version of the way the internet came about, where you're the products and then it's bad for you. And to your point, they pepper you with all this stimulation. It doesn't have to be that way. If you own your own data, if you own your own rights, say you're an author and you want to write books, I'm sure new authors don't want to sound like Dan Brown. They want to sound like themselves. And they want AI to improve that. And I think if we focus on the tools that be better people and better authors and better technicians, physicians, whatever it is, as tools into their daily lives, then we're going to keep the jobs. In fact, we might even create more jobs. We'll create a much better dynamic within our society. And then probably we won't all die, because there'll be checks and balances on the power of AI, because it'll be shared by the community. That's a vision I kind of want to put forward, is somewhat of a counter narrative to what's being espoused by Grok and by these guys in just some epic race to our death. I just think that's like very depressing. And I think being a kid out of the 80s, we just hope that things are better. And I also really believe that people can understand this stuff. And I think people are ready for it. It just needs to be taught better and shown better. There needs to be just better business models on it.
With your background in insurance, I caught wind of a secondhand conversation where insurance companies are saying right now that your current E&O insurance policy does not cover AI damages, which has to be setting enterprises back a step. If we implement an AI solution and it goes sideways, we may not be covered. I'm sure there's a bunch of insurance folks creating products around AI use coverage, and it'll be a separate line item on your policy for coverage. How do you think about the strategy versus a typical tech founder in light of your insurance background?
When you run an insurance company, you think of risk. You are the risk premium. So you're taking the least risk as possible, but at the same time trying to get people to pay you to take that risk. It's a great business if you get it right, and a great product market segment. With AI, they tend to, like all insurance companies, they tend to insure the things you don't need to be insured and then put exclusions for things that you need insured. So they never want to be the first layer. I think right now, one of the things that's becoming popular is theft of chips. 5090 card, or these cards do hold quite a bit of value. There are and have been a lot of GPU securitizations. We're unsure where those are priced. Insurance for a long time had transformer risk, so you could price the securitization as a swap into an insurance contract. I haven't seen that done much since the mortgage bond market, but I'm not unsurprised if they start getting into that business to insure a default risk on GPUs. Insurance is a laggard in these markets. It really is. They're doing InsurTech. You have these InsurTech conferences, which are still like 10 years behind where AI is. I don't think they have much of an idea. They talk about it. I've been to a couple conferences, but they're way behind. I haven't seen any good products design come out recently.
Yeah, and I've been in a couple of business situations where new insurance products need to be created, primarily around logistics. How to use driver data to establish a better track record of safety for truck drivers. How compliant is the truck driver? Therefore, their insurance premium should go down rather than up. Sort of like tailoring it. But then as that business was trying to get insurance product approved, they had to go through state approval. It was a state by state thing. So I'm sure that there's got to be pressure insure. Just to come out and say you don't insure it is not helpful to your customer. You have to then say, and this is how you could become. And I would imagine that an AI glitch gone sideways will be of a much larger scale than a single human mistake, which is why they're trying to figure it out.
I think where insurance could be useful in terms of traditional underwriting, they could focus on the energy side where I see most of the risk. For capital markets, you want cheaper capital to come into the energy world so that price points are cheaper along the value chain. And I think if you had proactive insurance companies insuring things like microgrids, batteries, all the infrastructure related to those sorts of installations, that the price of energy would be cheaper and that underlying infrastructure would be cheaper to support the compute market. Insurers want to insure things that they know about. Like, what is a transformer? What is a microgrid? They can wrap their heads around that. But what you're talking about is proactively thinking about underwriting. How does the data then change or optimize my forecasting model in terms of risk? They have some algos that already do that. I don't know how much AI has influenced them or helped them. I'm sure it's helping them reason through some other possible scenarios. But these math nerds, actuaries, they're pretty good at what they do already. I've seen them actually when I first got into sort of climate to begin with. I didn't want to talk to anyone in the political spectrum because I was like, all right, this climate stuff, is it really affecting us or is it not affecting us? A question people were really trying to answer. And I was like, who's going to know about this? Are the insurance guys, the climate desks. They create catastrophe bonds all the time. They sell those at investors and speculators on the climate desk. And so I asked those nerds, what do you think is the likely outcome? And the way they explained it was just, look, it's a simple equation. There's more CO2 in the atmosphere, creates higher volatility, and it's really an infrastructure risk than anything else. I'm like, yeah, but how hot do we get? And the guys were like something like 4 degrees by 2100. That also made me like, holy shit. Like, we've gotten to 1.5 in the last several years, and it's the volatility of the weather. It's not whether or not we get way hotter. It's really the volatility that you have to worry about in insurance. And then you start seeing uninsurable assets. So in the Midwest, they don't write hail coverage anymore. Florida, are they writing homeowner insurance anymore for older buildings? Nope. It's all structure. Slowly, you'll be uninsurable over a period of time. That kind of does scare me a little bit as an infrastructure risk.
Right.
Politics, you get lost in the white noise of politics. As a scientist, you want to really break through that and understand the mechanisms and the mechanics. I think people are missing the point here. They've stopped looking at what's actually in front of them.
Thanks for addressing the risk part of that. In your model, who do you feel like captures the most value? The energy owners, which would be a homeowner running solar, running a wind generator, Lektra, or the compute consumer? Because you mentioned 3 players. And how do you think about structuring that split? And what's your path to building a meaningful business around it?
Well, we've taken just the approach that we like an 80-20 split with the owner of the Lektra node. So we get 20 and we're aligned with our user. That was important to us. I want my node owners, server owners to make tons of money. I want to make good money, but if they make more, awesome, because they're going to word of mouth spread it and then we're going to get more users, and that's the way this thing works. The other side of that, the flip side of that is because we don't have the infrastructure cost, all that savings goes to the developer. So we're 60% cheaper than AWS and Google Cloud, and these guys make a profit. So we've squeezed the model. We've taken cheaper energy and outsourced the infrastructure so that developers get cheaper compute. It's just a more efficient market and everyone wins. What I want to see, how do we develop it from there? Once we get all these users with different Lektra nodes, they can add on different types of software. We can build better models for the developers, and it's a win-win for everyone. And the coolest part about the platform is that as a developer, the magic of the platform, you come to our platform and type in the Lektra bar, Superman with green underpants, for example. You want some images or whatever, and you have some models you can drop down. I see Superman with green underpants. But underneath it, it shows which servers powered it with what type of energy. You can see the daily usage of that energy, and you can see, oh, that's the energy that helped create this Superman with green underpants. You see it happening. Those were the photons that made this Superman. So there's this whole thing in AI right now where it's like, every OpenAI search is 10 times the amount of energy as a Google search or whatever it is. But now you can actually see that. So we're really trying to connect this nature between energy and the product itself in the compute side. I think that sort of visualization will help developers come up with new and innovative products, not just for energy, but how they think about utilizing the energy. Energy merchants will be like, oh, That's the amount of power they need. This is the tech we should put on. When the node hits, it'll say 85% green, 15% natural gas. You will know what types of energy are powering your compute. No other cloud company has ever even thought about showing what type of energy is used. Google and AWS, and I'm not trying to crap all over them, I'm just trying to tell you how awesome we are. But mostly AWS, Google, they'll use solar, but as like a carbon offset. They know they're using all this fossil fuel or whatever. And then they put a bunch of solar panels. It's on the accounting sheet. Oh, we're net neutral. But that's not authentic. That's not really utilizing that energy. We wanted to make sure that our users know what type of energy is going on and when. And if it's important for them to have 100% green, great. If not, who cares? The cheaper we can have this being sold to developers, they're not going to care anyways. But it's a great added value. The fact that we can deliver compute cheaper than a fossil fuel economy is evidence at the price points of solar and how good that technology has actually become. Because you're no longer trading into a monopoly, you're now getting the actual exchange rate or cost of the solar in a merchant market. That's what I think for me as a market guy, that's more exciting.
Who do you think feels the pain more acutely that Lektra solves? Is it the families wanting energy independence, businesses seeking lower compute costs, or the grid operators? Who feels this pain? Because I'm also thinking about right now when we think of using AI, we're thinking mostly in a cloud-based software term.
Right.
And we've been helping folks bring that into local data centers or post their own. Once they know what they want, they've used the public LLMs to narrow in. We've heard a couple of law firms, you actually don't want to use the public LLM. You want to use something that you've really watched and controlled and biased towards actual case law to reduce hallucination. So there's a specialty LLM happening too, where now that people find their use case, they don't have to continue to pay a premium for a large, broad cloud software. This is really just starting where people are going like, oh, what do you mean I can host this on my own and run it on my own hardware? But I'm going back to that question. Who do you think feels this pain the most?
It's a really good question. I don't know yet. Both worlds are expanding, so I don't know if we're taking anything from anyone necessarily. Grid operators still have plenty of energy being put onto their grid system. In fact, they're backed up, so it would actually be useful for them to have less people trying to... They could accommodate the grid a little bit better without all these people trying to get on it. There's this ever-expanding demand for energy. They're always going to be part of the equation, Grid 1.0, the backbone of energy. It's like the old internet cables that go under the deep sea before fiber optics, that layer. So it's always going to be there, and then we're filling in those gaps. In inference, there's no real great edge network out there yet that I've come across. I think everyone's trying to crack that code. We don't have much competition in that world. We have an O&M contract built in with every user of Lektra because they're at location, they're on-prem. They want to make sure they're making money out of this thing. It used to be that if you wanted to build an edge network, it's like a cost center. I have to put them at all these locations. I have to own that property, grid tie it, whatever, have an energy source. So it's never been done the way, it should be. I think from a market share point of view moving forward, the major like AWS and whatever, they're doing large LLM training, but I don't know what they're going to do on the inference world. In inference, we're building a marketplace for inference and fine tuning. So in that market, when we compete with them, that might be an area where we do compete and take away some business where it's mostly people trying to do inference on a cheaper cloud network. And so they have to give up some market share to that. But on the grand scheme of things, they have so much market share already, given the size of the cloud market, that maybe we make a dent. It's going to be a while before we actually materially take away any sort of market share from these guys. They are dinosaurs and they are pretty big folks. Not to say we can't grow fast, but it's micro data center by micro data center. It's really going back to the paper route. We're going door to door, getting systems out there into the market. So I would say the speed to market takes us a minute to get out there. I think we're all boats rise with us. I really do. I've been trying to identify a loser in our situation. I just think we're growing into an ever-growing market and we're just facilitating. We're a new tool amongst all the tool makers.
Yeah. I love what you're saying about the edge. I would get a lot of altruistic pride off of, because compute is turning, like old compute is almost like old rubber tires. What do you do with an old server? What do you do with old electronics? They just populate the landfill. What could be interesting is enabling a home labber like me to run edge-based workloads at a profit margin. Like that would really geek a bunch of people out. I have a Kubernetes cluster sitting right here next to me that's hardly doing anything, served off my home ISP, that I would love to put to some sort of use for AI workloads
You
or
have GPS in there?
you're
What do
going
you got? What do you got?
I just have a bunch of old think centers because it's a 10-inch, like a 10-inch mini rack, a little hobby situation. But I run a couple websites. I run a llama model for playing around. I host my wife's coaching business. For the stability that I get from my home ISP and the types of services I'm running there, it's an okay match. Probably runs at 98% uptime just because I think TU-verse is pretty oversold in my neighborhood. So I lose a couple percent of uptime. We're always looking for cool things that we could run at home. My son has a habit tracker that we run off of our own infrastructure to track his chores and moderate his Xbox time. To be able to use that in some sort of more profit-centric way or leverage that for some sort of NGO that's trying to do science research, I would love to do that. It would feel really cool. It'd feel like this is more than a hobby. This is actually worth something rather than just saving a few dollars in what would otherwise be a monthly cloud hosting cost.
Well, exactly. Right now, it's an energy management system at your house that automates all the energy in your house and keep your house safe and secure. So let's say there's a hurricane coming. It'll say, just store your energy. Don't use it for compute jobs or whatever. Then next, it wants to make as much money as it can for you. So it's going to sell it to compute. It's going to help you high frequency trading with your batteries. It can connect. But I think what you're talking to is Gen 2, which is really what else can we utilize this machine for? My contention with an Elon is I don't think you need to necessarily build a human looking robot for this. Your appendages can be all sorts of things. It can be the lawnmower. It can be a tractor. It can be an in-house Roomba. Those sorts of things can start running off the brain, which looks like a desktop computer or maybe a small server rack. Then you can automate those things within the house as you demand more energy. And you have smart AI homes that are 100% energy efficient. The demand for all the appliances moving forward is to build all these micro GPUs in your phone, in different devices. They're all going to connect. The demand for energy is going to skyrocket. So each location, you're going to have some sort of energy management system to figure this out. Lektra kind of thinking about that first. Energy as a base layer. But then building on that, that's what I want to open up as a platform for people to build tools, build things, just provide that architecture layer and then let people go nuts.
I love that because just going back to how right now we enjoy AI, this air quotes definition of AI, which is these cloud-based LLM, and bringing that into the home because the concern is that if I want to have an AI personal assistant, then I have to give them access to my bank and my credit card and my schedule and my emails and all these things. I think at some point that starts to not make as much sense anymore, especially as we learn what the large tech companies are actually doing with that information. If you're on a path to make a personal AI more approachable, where I can swap models in and out, but once I bring the model into my home environment, then it's mine, and I can actually see that the data is remaining in my own environment.
Well, the model should defend you as a person. The model, you're part of your property. It's a property in my head. It's build a digital wallet. All of your stuff is secure, and it should be deflecting against all the people trying to steal that information. But yeah, it should be vicious in trying to fight for your own security and the like. So no, I 100% agree with you. I think that's a much more sustainable business model in this dystopic first V1 of AI on cloud LLMs. You're right. It's limited imagination of what.
It's not just saying it may cause you, because if we talk to any of our parents, they got disturbed by the Industrial Revolution. How they thought they would approach commerce when they were a teenager has definitely shifted over their lifespan. It won't be any different for us. But the idea that it's robbing us of purpose is much more broad and largely
Well, it also comes back to intent. I think the people in the Industrial Revolution truly believed that the technology would improve the lives of others. And I think that was true also when the internet was coming out, late 90s, early 2000s. Everyone said, oh my God, the internet. Now I can know all the world's information. Everyone's going to be so smart. What are we going to do with all this information? And it was like a platform to do so many more cool things. AI has been like, no, we've already priced you as a product. We're going to commoditize it, then strip you of your job and rights, and then kill you. At some point, I don't mean to make that point a few times, but that's all I hear as a narrative. That's what ends up happening when you have too few people running the tech market. it becomes uncreative. It's a group think. And ultimately, you need society to develop the technology. The internet's awesome because everyone uses it, and we were able to come up with all sorts of cool stuff. Platforms should really just enable humans to do better things. And yeah, I totally agree with that. I like your observation. It's interesting.
As we conclude here, you mentioned you have a daughter, young, coming into the workforce, this AI fear about job reduction. What would you say to a young person? How should they invest their time and talent? How should they find hope in the opportunity? What advice would you give them?
Number one, emotional intelligence is paramount because the amount of anxiety and stress they go through is very different than the anxiety and stress we went through. I know it doesn't feel that way, but the bombardment and the way social media has manipulated younger kids, especially younger girls. And you were talking about this in your faith-based group, but like porn has driven males to go crazy and higher suicide rates and all this sort of stuff. So the next generation of kids, you really need to get them out of the house, doing physical things, helping them, show them how to build real things so they understand why they're building the technical tools to help improve those physical things. We're still living in a physical reality. And sometimes people miss that point. How do you help farmers? Why would you help the farm? And connecting agriculture to tech and those related things. So I think that's really important. I know with Lektra, I tinker with those machines and I bring them in front of my daughter so she can see the physicality of how this whole internet thing works. I think a lot of kids feel disconnected from it. I'd always advise them to not as much screen time, always reading books. I think reading books and long-term projects and seeing the fulfillment of building long-term projects is something that brings them great reward. I get nervous that they're not really doing the discipline of critical thinking, research, analysis.
What I'm hearing you say, when we were younger, this wasn't such a wall to climb.
Right.
But the consumer versus creator wall has gotten really high. There's so much for me to consume and such a demand of my attention. Us going out and getting a paper route was a means of creating a future for ourselves. If we don't connect them with, wait a minute, you're not a consumer, you're a creator. You're actually the special operator that gets in the Humvee to go out and do dangerous missions. You're not the gate guard that sits on the gate and just opens and closes the gate.
Right.
That mental shift is definitely a challenge. This summer, we let our 11-year-old have pretty much unbridled access to Xbox. He's connecting with his friends. That's what we excused, and had this whisper in the back of my mind that I needed to correct this or address this. So then super painful when we finally started to put some controls and habits and chores in place, driving some responsibility. But now he's read 2 or 3 books. It's a shift because if we don't get them to climb the wall over consumer to creator, then it's going to be a huge disadvantage because the opportunity to consume is just going to get so much bigger.
Yeah, no, I like how you put that. My daughter's a little actress. She's on some popular TV shows. Actually, she's got agents and it's pretty cool. So she's living in a real world, which is great. But you're right. The issue is, and I see this as a parent, even in the schools, I was talking to a school teacher, and sometimes the kids are so apathetic because they don't care about their grades. They'd rather be on their phone. They don't really care that much about college because the phone is too big. Now, that person taught at a public school in New York City. So you're thinking about, okay, maybe some kids do okay. But what about departments of education at a broader level? You really need to make sure that everyone is on the same page creating. But I do have a better vision of AI. I think it can be a tool for writers. They can test things out over time. I think it does help comedians. AI is not funny. Comedians are funny because they have an instinct. They can sense when you feel the tension. There's an instinct of mood. That's something computers just don't do. Music, I feel, is the same way. They're always like, oh, but you heard this AI rap? I'm like, it's the same stuff just reshuffled. It's not novel. Humans do novel things because our computer processing system draws from so many different things and it draws parallels, it draws analogies seamlessly. And so we need to leverage that. That is what we need to leverage, not be regurgitating things to a box that regurgitates it back in a simpler form. So I agree with you. Sounds like you're a really good dad. You're focused on this. No, but I am focused on the kids too. I really care about it extra because
you brought up a topic worth probably another podcast, which is I think live music is just going to explode. The more AI music is in the world, the more people are like, no, I want to go see somebody perform live. Like I've had enough of soulless music. And no matter how good the AI gets, even if the writing is original, that production will be soulless, and then folks will just crave seeing an artist perform live.
Cliffs of Dover, I don't think would have been written by a computer. This amazing music would not, and it's actually sometimes the imperfections that you hear make music what it is. It's the imperfection that people actually love in stories and everything else. No, but yeah, this could be a whole other podcast, to be honest with you.
Yeah, for sure. If people like what you've had to share, how would you like them to connect with you?
Oh man, I'm everywhere. I'm on LinkedIn. You can come hit the website. I'm very available. I keep myself open. I love to hear people's opinions, thoughts, and feedback. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, and I recognize that it's not about every company. It's not a monologue, us trying to push a product onto people. It's a dialogue with our consumers, market, and community. So the more I hear from people, I love it. I love to fail fast. I love to hear people's iterations, ideas. It only helps us refine things better. Even if I've heard it before, it's good to get someone else's take on it. So I love being 2 ears, 1 mouth.
Yeah, that's
Very,
great.
very
That's great. And then who specifically are you most interested in speaking to?
I talk to solar distributors all the time, and then developers. I think developers, I want to hear how they consume our cloud, understand our cloud, build work environments around it, because there's other neo clouds out there. What we can do to differentiate ourselves. I know it's the energy. We can do the cheap thing and edge. There's probably a lot more to it. They bring a breadth of experience that I wouldn't see. I've got good cloud guys, but it takes a market of ideas.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for spending your time, just this intersection between compute and energy and the awareness that you've brought from really something we should be talking more about, which is the health of our overall infrastructure, because you're absolutely right. We keep plugging things in, expecting it to work, but that music could stop, and I wouldn't have known that without you. So thanks for sharing that.
I appreciate you and your firm and everything you're doing. I'd love to work with you in the future as well. You guys run a great shop. So thank you for having me. It's awesome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Cheers, man.